Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back. It's another Red Pill Religion podcast. Red Pill Religion, where we say many things, amongst which is the belief in the supernatural and the transcendent. Noise there. Our guest, can you have minimized noise, please? So let's say again, thanks for joining us on Red Pill Religion, where we say that belief in the supernatural and the transcendent is normal, healthy, rational, and evidence-based. If you like the kind of work we're doing here, please support our work on redpillreligion.com. redpillreligion.com, where every day we have new articles and videos, and where you will find our PayPal, Bitcoin, and Subscribestar links and links to our merchandise. We would appreciate your support. Please give us a like and a subscribe here on YouTube, where we don't seem to be under too much threat of being taken out again lately, but it's happened so many times. Just remember, we do our best to back our shows up, and you'll always find us on redpillreligion.com. Also find us on Gab, find us on Subscribestar, find us on Minds, find us, but especially on Minds, and start looking for us on Dissenter, because Dissenter looks like it's going to be all kinds of fun if they don't manage to Dissenter. In fact, I'm just going to give a free plug to Dissenter.com. Y'all should get Gab accounts and sign up for Dissenter.com. It's the internet's free, uncensored political dissent and commentary, and you'll be able to comment on any articles for any website that has either no comment section or a highly censored one. On Dissenter, you can say what you want about any story or anything you find on the internet. So, and we're on it now. We're going to go ahead and endorse it right now. Dissenter is pretty awesome. So far, so good. You can comment on anything, and that's something we've all lost. So find us on Dissenter and Gab and all those other places. We also got the free Discord chat right now. So joining us today, we're going to have is Misha Popoff. Now, Misha Popoff, man, can we do anything? Misha, we got a lot of noise in your background there, brother.
Yeah.
But I guess you've been on the Non Sequitur show, about which I'll say no more, except I'm glad you survived. And
yeah,
you've been on Salt and Earth. You've been on a number of other podcasts, and I just thought it might be interesting to try talking to you tonight. Now, you're a Christian, obviously. What kind of Christian would you describe yourself as?
Well, I go to a mega church here in Rockwall, Texas, because that's really all that's available. Okay. I used to be a Doukhobor. I don't know if you're familiar with the Doukhobors, but we were we left Russia before the revolution. That would be my cultural ethnic roots.
Russian Orthodox, then?
Yes, yeah, Russian Orthodox, but there's nothing like that around here, and I've never lived near a Russian Orthodox church ever in my life. So I've been through many churches over the years.
A whole lot of the Russian Orthodox in the United States have wound up in something called the Orthodox Church of America, which you can look up if you want. Yeah, Orthodox Church, a ton of Russian. Well, I know we're just here to talk, but yeah, a ton of Russian Orthodox. The Russian Orthodox in the United States were in limbo for a long time because, you know, the patriarch had told people to flee, and then they've been here for generations, and it's not now, well, do we belong to Moscow? Do we belong to Constantinople? But they eventually formed something with some other people, something called the Orthodox Church of America. So the Orthodox Church of America has a really strong Russian Orthodox background. Also others, but a whole lot.
Oh yeah, I was not aware of that.
Yeah, it's worth. I'll send you a link after the show, but just look for Orthodox Church of America.
Yeah.
They've even got a few Alaskan saints, at least one. Name. So that's pretty cool. But no, all you got around there is a mega church. Well, it's better than nothing. I don't know. We always have tension here at Red Pill Religion, because all of us on Red Pill Religion are some type of broadly Orthodox Christian, high church Anglicans, Catholics, Eastern Orthodox. We have friends who are Protestant, but we rub each other the wrong way with Protestants a lot. But some we're real cool with. So it's good to have you on. Now, one of the things that's intriguing, you've written me about this, and you've talked on, I think, some other places about it. You have an interesting theory about what the New Testament, in specific the book of Matthew and the book of Luke, both make reference to salt. And you have, and by the way, I remind everybody, we're not running a Catholic channel here. There's a channel run by a Catholic. There's a difference. And we're not here to give proper Catholic scriptural read. We're here to talk to people with interesting ideas. And I remind anybody listening, in case you didn't know, on this show, we don't even just interview Christians. We've had on pagans, we've had on Jews, we've had on professional witches. We simply talk to people who are spiritual about their experiences and their views and such like that. So, what can you tell us about your theory about salt in the Bible?
Yeah. Well, first of all, there's only really one word for salt, and it's used. It was used throughout the centuries, throughout biblical times, right up to the Renaissance, actually. And so whether it was in Greek, I believe the word is halal, or something close to that, and then it gets translated. And there was confusion throughout the centuries between two totally different substances that looked the same. And one of them is salt. The other one is saltpeter, and it's actually not a salt. It's nitrogen. In various forms. There's potassium nitrate. There can be a type of nitrogen that is close to salt because it's a sodium nitrate. But in any case, I mean, you wouldn't put this on your food. Let's just say that for starters. And then people should know the main functions of nitrogen are to either make explosives or to use as a fertilizer. And not just any fertilizer, it's really the key fertilizer. And,
okay.
And again, not just, yeah.
Let me back you up for a minute here. So
Sure.
You're saying that saltpeter occurs in nature and it looks identical or very, very close to regular salt. That's what.
Right.
So I want to make sure the audience understands. Okay, there's this stuff you can find called saltpeter. You find it in nature. It occurs naturally. It looks like salt. Can you eat it?
It's not. It could kill you. Basically, they used to use it in apothecaries used it, for primitive medicine. But really, no. I mean, it's basically poison. You shouldn't eat nitrogen. We do eat nitrogen that's been converted into protein. Without nitrogen, this is why it's the key fertilizer. Without nitrogen, you don't have any protein in your food. So we only eat it after it's been incorporated into a polypeptide chain. That's the technical term.
In fact, while some will complain about it, I forgot what is it. I just lost my train of thought. That's so embarrassing. The saltpeter. Yeah. What I was trying to say is nitrogen. Yeah, if you put it in soil, it will cause plants to grow faster and larger and that sort of thing. As far as I know, yes. Right? Yeah. In fact, in some cases, it's controversial for that very reason, because some people.
Oh yeah, you can use you can use too much. Definitely, that's the only problem is but without it, there would be no agriculture and there would be no protein in our food. Quite literally, it is literally the key ingredient in farming. Also, until we developed modern explosives, like nuclear bombs and such, it was the mainstay of the battlefield for all throughout history. Without saltpeter, you don't have gunpowder. So that's the link here.
Okay, so all right, so let's get to it then, because immediately you're trying to tell me that if I have the verses right in Luke 14, chapter 14, verse 34, we have a quotation of salt is good, but if the salt have lost its flavor, wherewith shall it be seasoned? And then we've also got Matthew chapter 5, verse 13. Ye are the salt of the earth, but if the salt have lost its flavor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is therefore good for nothing, but to be cast out and to be trodden underfoot of men. Okay, so tell me what you're thinking the lightning to saltpeter there is.
Yeah. Now, in both, so far, everything's fine with what we would call the standard interpretation, what you just read. And everyone concentrates on Matthew when it comes to the Sermon on the Mount and when it comes to referencing phrases like salt of the earth, ye are the salt of the earth. But if we look to Luke, really the putting salt in, actual table salt, or also called common salt, it breaks down, because in Luke he goes on to say, he explains further, he elaborates, and remember, they're recording what Jesus said, or what they remember Jesus saying in his sermon. So in Luke, the crucial words are, when salt has lost its flavor, it is no longer good for the land or for the dunghill. And if you want to go outside the Bible, I could just explain to you any number of ways that salt is never good for the land or for the dunghill. But even within the Bible, let's just stick with the Bible. As you may know, if we look back into the Old Testament, it was common when you invaded someone and murdered all the women and children and the livestock, you'd go one step further when you were really vengeful of your enemy, and you'd salt their fields. So we have to ask ourselves, well, what is Luke talking about? Yeah, what? And Luke would have known this. That's from, I believe it's quoted in my article. I believe it's from the Book of Kings, where King Abimelech, who murdered 70 of his brothers and half-brothers so he could become king, was not people shouldn't get confused. There's more than one King Abimelech in the Bible, by the way, but this particular one murdered his way to the throne, and then when he invaded the neighboring tribes, whoever they were, he salted their fields. So what is Luke talking about?
This is very true in history. I want to emphasize for the audience what he's saying is actually true. If you put salt in the earth, stuff doesn't grow in it anymore. And historically, that used to be a way of truly trying to destroy a people. And go in there, kill everybody, and raise the ground and kill everybody or enslave everybody, whatever you got to do. And then just to make double damn sure those people aren't coming back, you salt the earth, and then they won't be able to grow crops for a number of years.
Decades potentially.
Decades potentially, right?
Yeah.
So
it'll eventually wash out, but the modern day equivalent would be depleted uranium, and that's getting used a lot in the Middle East, and it has a lasting effect.
Yeah. So, but saltpeter, which I don't know where you find saltpeter technically. Saltpeter is mostly rich in nitrogen, and if you put that in soil, plants will tend to grow faster, right? Or am I remembering that? Right. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So you would put saltpeter in your land, and Now just to continue, we should back up a bit. So both Matthew and Luke say, they refer to salt losing its flavor, and salt can't lose its flavor.
Right.
Table salt never loses. Yeah, it can't. But saltpeter does. It evaporates. So even though, as you've mentioned, you can find naturally occurring potassium nitrate or sodium nitrate, you can find them in nature. Usually it's found from manure, from the composting process. But however you find it, it's temporary, it's fleeting. And if you don't use it, it'll just disappear. So it evaporates in essence. And so the same thing happens today with modern agriculture, where you can get basically saltpeter, nitrogen, in a solid pelletized form. That's the most common one that people will sprinkle on their lawns, and farmers of course use that. Or if you get it in a liquid or even a gaseous state for ammonium nitrate. Especially the gas one, obviously that's going to disappear right before your very eyes. But all of them are temporary. Once they're put in the soil, either as a solid or a liquid or a gas, they actually inject the gas right into the dirt, or it would just dissipate. But once it's in the soil, you need to plant a crop in it. It doesn't just stay. See, whenever you buy fertilizer, it always says NPK on the bag. So the N is for nitrogen, P is for phosphorus, and the K is for potassium.
It's potassium
phosphorus and
nitrate.
potassium.
Potassium nitrate?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah, that's
If anybody's curious, you can actually literally go out on Amazon and buy some of this stuff. And I would say,
yeah.
you know, based on that illustration, which I'm showing here, that would easily be taken for salt.
Yeah, exactly. You nailed it. That's you can understand why they only had one word for it. See, Jesus would have known when he made this analogy. He would have known he was referring to the salt that is used on the land, and that's why Luke recorded his words saying, "If salt loses its flavor, it's no longer good for the land." But Jesus has no choice, right? He can't use another term that doesn't exist yet. In his day, and right up to the Renaissance, as I mentioned, there was only one term for that, for all of those salts.
Okay, so let's get the quote again, Luke 14, 34 and 35. Salt is good, but if the salt has lost its flavor, wherewith shall it be seasoned? It is neither fit for the land, nor yet for the dunghill, but men cast it out. He who hath ears to hear, let him hear. So what he's saying is, okay, the people even at this time they didn't have two words for salt versus saltpeter. They would know from context what he meant, because you would not eat saltpeter. Or
Correct.
you wouldn't eat much, because it's not really fit for human consumption, as far as I know.
Exactly.
But they would have seen it as so probably, yeah. If they encountered it in their day, they would probably, you know, take a little taste of it on the tongue or something like that and say, "Oh no, that's not the table salt. That's not
exactly." Yes. They could. That was the only way they could tell the difference, was by tasting it, and it does. In essence, saltpeter does not taste like a salt. It's more tangy and acidic. Although I've never tried it, but that's what my research indicates. Yeah.
So they would have known instantly what it was, but you're saying even during this time they would put it on soil to encourage crop growth. They were already doing this 2,000 years ago.
Yeah. See, now there's a misconception that gunpowder, and you don't have gunpowder without saltpeter, that it was really invented by the Chinese around the 12th or 13th century and then made its way to Europe by the 13th or 14th century. But that's just sort of standard traditional historical narrative. There's evidence going back into biblical times of saltpeter being used as an explosive. The Greeks had something called Greek fire. Nobody knows what it was. Some people think it was just tar. And if you saw the movie 300, they depicted the use of actual grenades. So like tar just lights on fire, and then you could throw it at the enemy, and all the enemy has to do is duck to get out of the way. So Greek fire is well known throughout history. And again, no one really knows what it is, and I don't want to base my theory on a lousy Hollywood movie, but at least in that movie 300, they actually depicted the use of these grenades, these sort of pottery grenades, and that would have had to use an explosive, not a tar, which is merely flammable.
So to catch everybody up again, if you're not a history geek. The Greeks used to use as a weapon of war something called Greek fire, which they would launch fire at enemy ships and, you know, burn people and burn the ships on the water. And it was considered rather terrifying. And so far as I know, nobody knows exactly what it was formulated of. Some have guessed tar balls, but you're arguing for something it couldn't have just been tar.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's also accounts of it burning even once it hits the water. Well, anyone who's ever heard of like people will go fishing with dynamite. So you light, even to this day, when they don't fish with dynamite, it's illegal, but they'll use it to test the water. Fishermen, they'll have a little stick of dynamite and they'll throw it out to see how many fish come up, so they can know whether to cast their nets out. In any case, the point is, when you light a stick of dynamite, and the key ingredient again is the nitrogen, the saltpeter, you throw that in the water, it keeps burning and it'll explode underwater even if it's sinking. So yeah, if we look at the accounts of the use of Greek fire, it does not appear to be tar. because even though tar will still burn, it'll sink. Whereas saltpeter, if it was ignited in the air and then landed on the water, it'll just keep burning right on the surface of the water. So in any case, yeah. There's another example though, if you want to get into it. I've taken a lot of flack for it, and that's the walls of Jericho. If you want to get into that, that to me strikes me definitely as a very early use of an explosive agent that we have not identified, and I would propose that was probably some version of gunpowder.
A ball of tar and saltpeter set on fire might do all kinds of interesting things. Probably wouldn't be real predictable as a weapon, but it would probably be terrifying and effective in a lot of ways. So, okay, well, I mean, so let's take it back to that then, though. All right, so, and this is interesting, and this makes sense, although it doesn't. It actually does make the verse make a lot more sense instantly. I mean, one of the things that's hard sometimes is Jesus says something, it's like, what does he mean? And now that you mention it,
yeah,
I'm like, I remember going back. I mean, I was an atheist for decades, but I did have a few years of churching as a kid. They didn't stick, not really. But in any case, I remember reading. So I have heard that nightline a few times since then. Salt is good, but the salt has lost its flavor. Wherewith shall it be seasoned? I'm like, how does salt lose its flavor? I just kind of was kind of, well, I kind of assumed, I don't know, thinking like a materialist anyway, I kind of assumed that maybe there's some state in which salt gets a certain kind of wet or something, it might start to develop some kind of thing that causes it to break up. But that was just a vague thought I had, because I don't even know what would do that to salt. I really don't.
Yeah. Yeah, the only possibility is if it dissolves, right?
Right.
If salt dissolves, right? But then why would we be talking about putting it on the land or the dunghill? Because then it's gone. I mean, it is washed away if it dissolves. So it wouldn't be good for the land if it was salt at all, or the dunghill. But yeah, the only thing that makes salt sort of disappear before your eyes, if you will, is when it dissolves into a liquid. And so yeah, and then the whole metaphor just falls apart, doesn't it? And we know sometimes the disciples might I wouldn't say make a mistake, but the reason we have 4 disciples is because they're human and they're recording the thoughts and philosophy of their creator himself, Jesus. And so we need all 4 of them to just sort of piece this puzzle together. And yeah, it's Luke who comes, I think, closest to really nailing it, because he includes the land and the dunghill.
Nor yet for the dunghill. Like, what would you put saltpeter on a dunghill for? To make gunpowder.
Yeah. No. So what happens?
Yeah, wait a minute. You can get saltpeter. Wait a minute. You can get saltpeter out of dung, can't you?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So you put saltpeter on land, and you get it from a dunghill. But how do you get it from a dunghill? Anyone who's made sourdough or yogurt knows that you take a bit of the last batch and you inoculate the next batch with it to ensure the proper bacterial growth. And that is exactly what you do with a dunghill. It's not really done anymore because we don't practice, what we now call organic farming is really a subset of agriculture. But that's what you would do. You would take the previous batch that worked out well. If it didn't work out well, then it's no good for anything. See, if you have the wrong bacteria, you won't get a proper nitrogen out of your dunghill, out of your compost heap. But if you did get a good bang for your buck, if you will, you take some of that previous dunghill, which is now compost, and you incorporate it into the new dunghill. And just like if you're making yogurt, that directs the bacteria. That gives you the proper bacteria growth, because this is all. It's only bacteria, by the way, that break our food down. But there's a lot of bad bacteria, and they'll go ahead and break your food down, but it won't have any nitrogen. It's only certain bacteria that give us that magical ingredient. So yes, you get nitrogen from a dunghill, And the best way to get it from a dunghill is to put some into it. And that would be called seasoning, by the way. That's actually called seasoning your dunghill.
You have an article backing all this up? Because this is interesting. This suddenly just...
Sorry, you skipped out there.
I'm sorry, you have an article documenting all this that you can send, right? Hello? Okay, everybody. We seem to be having technical difficulties. Misha, can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yes. And you said I have an article out. Yeah.
You have an article on it. Will you please send me the link to it as soon as possible so I can give it to all our readers so that they can go and look at this information themselves?
Yes, yes. And I can't do that during the interview, but yes, I'll send it right away.
All right. Because what you're saying doesn't sound crazy at all now, at least this portion.
Yeah.
I know something about primitive agriculture. I know that in fact you get saltpeter out of horse, cow dung, that sort of thing. I don't know how, but I know you get it out of that. And yeah, it doesn't surprise me. People have known that they can use that to fertilize the soil for a long, long time. They're really just adding nitrogen. At least that's what modern chemists think. Sometimes I think chemists are a little overgeneralized, but yeah, they're adding, or they leave things out sometimes. But so all the ancients would have known this. And so that actually makes it sound like this is obviously what he's talking about, especially as if it's what you just said. They had no two words to distinguish salt from saltpeter. They just knew one was the kind of salt that you eat, and the other was the kind that was fit to go into the land.
Yeah. And strangely, they only had one word for it. The other word we see in the Bible is, of course, niter, which is where we get the modern term nitrogen. So there is reference to niter in the Bible, but really, Bible scholars agree that was in reference to the use of perhaps nitrogen or salt as a cleansing, for basically like a soap or something.
So when we say wherewith, if salt is good, but if salt has lost its savor. See that the word savor, now this may be a bad translation. I don't know. Savor, flavor.
Yes.
If it's the flavor of saltpeter is, you wouldn't want to, you can eat small amounts of it medicinally. It's supposed to have some effects, but as a rule, you're just not going to be eating this. So why would he even talk about it having a flavor or a savor or whatever?
Right. Well, because that was the only way to distinguish back then. If you can believe it, they would actually taste things like arsenic to make sure it was real arsenic. Now, you might think, well, how do you do that without dying? Well, you put a tiny pinprick of it on your tongue. And I would never do this. But yeah, that was how apothecaries and early doctors, that's how they identified things.
Dude, they would identify things. In fact, I'll tell you a gross story, just to change the subject. But we're talking about ancient medicine here. The name diabetes is quite ancient, and diabetes literally means sweet urine. And I'll give you 3 guesses as to how doctors determined this.
Oh yeah.
In fact, they were known to take a big swig and swish it around and give really precise diagnoses. Woof, woof. But the point is made. People test things by tasting them.
That was common.
Yeah, my doctor doesn't do that, neither is my pharmacist. But that was like until less than a century ago. It's just how you did this stuff for the most part.
Yeah.
So, but how does saltpeter lose its flavor? How does it do that?
And then that is dead easy. It literally evaporates. So right now, above our heads, the Earth's atmosphere is 70% nitrogen. And that's where we get into trouble, actually, with modern agriculture. There's so much nitrogen in the Earth's atmosphere. And the ancients knew that, but they couldn't access it. It wasn't until the last year of the First World War that the Germans figured out how to synthesize the atmospheric gaseous nitrogen into a solid form. And they, of course, tried winning the war with that. In any case, it evaporates. Whether you find it in nature in a solid form or in a liquid form, which would be more rare than a solid. Either way, it's going to disappear on you. It's fleeting, and it's only plants and bacteria that put it into a form we can use again until the last year of the First World War, when we figured out how to synthesize it.
Well, it's basically,
but yeah, it evaporates.
It's basically a powder, but it evaporates anyway, huh? That's interesting. Oh, probably
Yeah, exactly.
Probably even faster if it's mixed with water, I imagine, or mixed with.
Oh yeah, once you put it in, yeah, once you so if you buy granular fertilizer for your yard or garden, it's fine in the bag. Although if you leave the bag open, it will eventually, the nitrogen will evaporate out of the bag. So you got to leave the bag shut. And once you put it into the soil, it then dissolves in the soil. And yes, the clock is ticking. You've got a few months to make use of that nitrogen. And here's the really sad part. Only half of the nitrogen that you'll put in your garden or your yard, only half the nitrogen that all of the farmers in the world use, only half of it is taken up by the plant. The other half runs off into the waterways and eventually evaporates. And that's where we get into a lot of problems with modern agriculture, because they're frankly using way too much nitrogen. But again, yes, it evaporates. It will evaporate from a solid form, but once you dissolve it, once you put it in soil, then it's really going to evaporate on you quickly.
Okay, so and here's where I'm trying, maybe I'm being dense, but losing its savor and evaporating and not being fit for the land, something that is evaporated isn't something you can put on the land. So I'm lost on how saltpeter loses its savor as opposed to disappearing. So
right. Well, just like if you have a bag of fertilizer, okay, and it's granular, and it's never going to be pure nitrogen. They're going to put some phosphorus and potassium in there too. And if you left that bag open and then went and looked at it a year from now, it would pretty much look the same. It would weigh slightly less, but it would look the same. All the nitrogen would have escaped, and you're just left with whatever other ingredients. So it's the same with a compost pile. I wouldn't recommend tasting compost, as we were just discussing, but that's how they could tell if compost was rich in nitrogen. And yes, if you wait too long, then you still have a pile of compost. It looks like nice black rich dirt, and it's good dirt, but most, if not all, of the nitrogen will have evaporated, and now the flavor will have changed.
So you're saying that okay, wait a minute. Okay. So I might have something I'm calling saltpeter, and if I leave it sitting around, the nitrogen eventually slowly evaporates, and just the other base compounds are there. So you've got this powdery stuff, but it's really just some calcium, some carbon, whatever else was in the soil, and most of all the nitrogen's gone. So and it will not taste the same when they test it anymore either, will it?
Right.
It will taste like salt that has lost its savor, and that is
exactly
because, again, we modern people don't do this. In fact, it grosses us out. But really, a century ago, even 50 years ago, hell, drug dealers on the street still. I mean, it's tasting things to figure out what their chemical content is. I mean, they didn't have the chemical names, but they knew what they were looking at. And like, oh, that's the earth salt. That's the soil salt. Let me taste it. Oh no, it's gone bad. And now really, it's useless, isn't it? You wouldn't be able to do anything with it.
Correct. It would no longer be good for the land, and you definitely wouldn't put it in your dunghill, because now that would be like putting bad yogurt in with your next batch of yogurt. You would be directing the wrong bacteria now. So yeah, men cast it out. That's it.
This is salt that's lost its flavor. This is the earth salt. Earth salt. We'll call it earth salt versus table salt.
Yeah.
Well, just so people get the idea. Earth salt, you don't eat that, or only for special things, medical things or something. And the table salt goes in your mouth, not in the ground. earth salt, saltpeter, goes in the ground, not in your mouth, as a rule. And
correct.
people would taste.
Yeah.
Okay, and so now when we look again at what he's saying here, okay, and what is he saying about Christians here then?
Yeah. What is he saying? You're absolutely right to ask that.
Is he saying that if they've lost the spirit, if they've lost their faith, if they've... I said now I have to go back and read it all in context because I've been focusing on the word.
No.
Remember, what's he saying here overall then?
Yeah, so this is where we need all four gospel writers, because now we have to leave Luke. Luke is the only one who mentions salt losing its flavor. Well, Matthew mentions it losing its flavor, but Luke is the only one who mentions that when it loses its flavor, it's no longer good for the land or the dunghill. We have to leave Luke now. The other, Matthew and John and Mark, all make reference to that other saying that you'll see on bumper stickers and T-shirts, which is to be salt and light. What does table salt have to do with light? Nothing.
Okay,
I mean, that's an even easier one, isn't it?
Give me the chapter and verse on you're talking about again.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'll have to find that. I should have told you before, so you'd have it ready. Control F. Oh, just a sec. But yes, we've all heard that expression. While I'm looking for it here, to be salt and light. You're the salt of the earth, right?
You're the salt of the earth, salt and light. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to find it here.
I was dubious. I was dubious before we went in, but I'm like all in right now. I can't wait to tell him what he's going to tell me next. This makes perfect sense, and it is clarifying just something that always seemed like, what does he mean by salt? I don't get it. I always had a hard time getting it. Like,
yeah. Oh, and I'm sorry. I just now Luke mentions to be the light to the world, but not salt and light. And I'm just trying to find it. Salt and light. Oh, darn.
Matthew.
Oh, I don't know if I'll find it here. I should have had it ready. But we've all heard the expression to be salt and light. And as I say, the other gospel writers do make that reference. And again, table salt has nothing to do with light. So it's an even looser metaphor than, the previous issue we were just discussing. Like you said, when you were in seminary school, you read this, and it was 35 years ago. I was in a Bible study reading this, and I remember asking the pastor, well, how does salt lose its flavor, and what does salt have to do with light? And in any case, nothing. But if it's saltpeter, here's the thing: you don't get a flash of light out of your gunpowder if there's no saltpeter in it. The other ingredients in gunpowder are, of course, charcoal and sulfur, and they will burn, no problem. They'll burn just fine, but they won't explode with a blast of light. So I think that really cinches it. I think that's what Jesus was referring to.
I wish we could find the exact verse you're talking about, because now I want to examine it. It says you are the light. Yeah, I guess I'm losing you on this one because I can't see the verses. If you can find that verse, it would be helpful.
Yeah.
I'm searching on the internet for Bible, salt and light, and I can't find the two words together anywhere, so that's kind of weird. We having one of those Mandela effect moments? Bible, salt, and light.
Yeah, see, I'm not hooked up to the internet right now. I can't look beyond. Oh, let me just have another quick look.
It says here, someone suggesting Matthew 13, Matthew 5:13 through 16. Yeah, well, in any case, it does says we are the salt of the earth and you are the light of the world. Actually, there is probably no verse putting those two together. It's probably 13 and 14. 13 says you are the salt of the earth. 14 says you are the light of the world. I think.
Oh, yeah.
It. Yeah, so we are salt and light based on those two words. There's no one verse that puts them together. By the way,
correct. That's probably right.
one of the things I wish more Christians knew is that verse numbers are not part of the original text and are just a tradition.
Right.
People get way too hung up on those. So when you're looking at, when I say that's two different verses, like not when he wrote it, he was just writing a paragraph, basically.
Yeah, you're right. Yes.
So he's saying you're the salt of the earth, but the salt loses its saltiness. How can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. So a town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, and may they see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Well, that is very interesting. I'm not quite sure I'm seeing where you're coming with the gunpowder reference, though, brother. You may have lost me on that one.
Well, because, let's start with what it can't be. It can't be table salt that provides that light. Although, as you say, it's two different sentences, which are broken down into two different verses. And but if it's saltpeter, and if they knew at the time that it had more uses than just in agriculture, as I've hypothesized that there was, they knew back then there was a military use. Then the phrase salt and light, even if separated by a few more words, even in two different verses, the phrase salt and light, it comes to life if you put in saltpeter and light. And now saltpeter on its own, by the way, does not, it'll burn, but it won't explode. But it's the catalyst that causes the sulfur and charcoal to go from just burning to exploding. And it gives off an incredible amount of light. By the way, on that note, fireworks are all based on the same chemistry as munitions. Fireworks are just
absolutely, that's absolutely true. That's why we say the Chinese had gunpowder thousands of years ago. Well, in reality, sometimes I'm surprised we didn't have it because it's not that hard to make, really. Once the Chinese showed us how, everybody could do it. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
I have a hard time.
And also, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I have a hard time thinking, though, that Jesus is referring to gunpowder here because I just don't see anybody knowing what the heck he's talking about until we met the Chinese, however many centuries later.
That's a fair point. Yeah.
I'm straining on this one because I don't think they would have got the metaphor.
Within a traditional historic framework, no one, until recently, no one thought gunpowder was known before the 12th century at the earliest. Now, there are some Muslim scholars who've said what you just said, that once you see how easy it is to make gunpowder, you have to ask yourself, how could they have not known? And here's why. We've mentioned the dunghill. People have compost piles in their backyard, but the main, what you really want if you want a proper compost is dung. You want feces. So how could people know that they're getting nitrogen? They didn't have a name for it yet. They just called it salt. But how could they know they're getting this great fertilizer from composting feces, animal and human? How could they know that? But then not take that next step. It's not a big step to go to the next level. And here's what happens. If you refine it well enough, then you not only have a very good fertilizer, the more you refine the compost, you'll eventually get a crystal, just like you showed the picture of. And there's reason to believe that they were doing that all throughout history as fertilizer, because there's way more impact from that crystallized version of the nitrogen as opposed to a black soil compost version. Then to go from that, by the way, and if you light that on fire, it will burn. And so there you are. Imagine at any time in history where someone would set fire to refined compost, and to his astonishment, it burns. Now, of course, feces will burn as well. Dung is used to this day. Sure. Yeah, it's used. yeah, they'll use it to heat their huts in parts of the world. So, and again, that's because of all the gas in it and the nitrogen in it. But it's also because of other gases like methane and such.
But if you load it up with nitrogen, it'll burn a lot better. With purified nitrogen, huh?
Yeah. So now, just imagine purifying, and maybe you're just doing it so you have better fertilizer. And then, by accident or because you're experimenting, someone throughout the eons of time decided to set fire to it, which is one of the ways of assaying any chemical. We just discussed how they would taste things. They would also, mix them with mercury to see what color they turned. And there's all sorts of lists in ancient alchemical texts on what chemical you're probably dealing with if it turns this color or if it turns that color when added to mercury and such. But lighting things on fire was also a way to determine what substance you were dealing with. And so, for instance, if you're dealing with salt and you light it on fire, well, nothing's going to happen. Right. I think salt only melts; it doesn't even burn, but it melts at something like it's incredible. It's almost like iron.
Yeah, you can almost
salt basically doesn't.
Yeah, you can put a fire.
Yes, exactly.
But saltpeter will burn, especially if.
Oh yeah. So now instead of waiting for the Chinese, now you have to sort of try to explain, why did no one ever do this ever? And I think someone did do it, and it just became a military secret. Again, just because we're, your listeners, we don't have time to get into all the academic references, but I do have them. But the movie 300 is the best example, just for quick and dirty explication here. So there you are dealing with a pre-Christian historical event that no one denies, and the use of Greek fire there depicted in that movie was in the form of pottery hand grenades. And so I think people did try setting fire to refined compost, and all they knew was they had what looked like a salt, and unlike table salt, it burned. And there's quotations from the Renaissance where they say it burns with vehemence. It doesn't just burn like wood or charcoal, it burns with vehemence. And then, so yeah, you would mix it with other things that burn, well, like charcoal and sulfur. And there's no trouble with sulfur. I mean, that goes all the way back to ancient times. Burning sulfur, of course, God uses sulfur and brimstone to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. So how do we theorize that no one ever did this until the 12th or 13th century? And I think that's a bit of a stretch.
Well, no, I'll give you that. I think we should get closing up now because we've gone almost an hour, and this has been fascinating.
Sure.
Ruminated through my head. I'm at least pretty much on board with the analogy of the salt versus saltpeter. This makes perfect sense. I'll have to percolate the setting it on fire part a little harder before I think it through. Will you do us a favor? Send me this article, and when I release this interview, which will probably be tonight or tomorrow, we'll make sure that people have a link to it. And it's been great. Misha doesn't, just so everybody knows, Misha does not have his own channel or anything. He's just an academic, a scholar who looks into these things, and a free-floating Christian, as we've mentioned. But this is fascinating. And I got to tell you, honestly, I was really skeptical going in what you were talking about. I really was, especially when I heard gunpowder. But now,
I'm glad we were able to talk it out.
This actually, at least the salt and saltpeter part now makes absolute sense. And I can see how you could look at it and say, well, it's losing its, the saltpeter's lost its savor, it's lost its spirit, it doesn't really work anymore. That makes so much sense to me. It really, really does. So I'll tell you what, guys, I think we'll just go ahead and close up the interview here, but I think we'll probably invite Misha to come on again because this was a fun conversation. So you're not going to find him online. You'll find him on other shows. He was on a show called Salt and Earth. He's been on those People That Non Sequitur show. He's been on some other shows too. So look for him around the internet. You'll find him. And otherwise, everybody, give us a like, give us a subscribe. Please tell your friends or enemies. Check us out on the redpillreligion.com channel, on redpillreligion.com, and on all our other social media. And hit that tip jar if you would. All right. And God bless everybody. Thanks so much, Misha.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. Have a good evening, Max.
God bless.